Over the past 2 years, KC Communities for All Ages has partnered with the First Suburbs Coalition to create tools and programs and resources to assist our regional communities to prepare for the significant increase in our older adult population, but also for the significant increase in diverse populations and other demographic changes that are occurring. It was suggested a professional network be created for elected officials and city staff to discuss their understanding of age-friendly strategies and share regional practices. As we know, all of our communities are really doing some pretty fantastic work. Professional network meetings over the next year will focus on topics that are included in the Communities for All Ages checklist that was developed last year. And many of you are familiar with that checklist and are working with it, but for those who aren't familiar with it, there are copies of the checklist on the table. So feel free to take one home with you. Also in your packet, there's a list of topics and dates of professional network meetings through, I think it's July. And we hope to continue those, but those are the ones that we have scheduled so far. The next meeting is on transportation. So when you get that announcement, feel free to forward that to folks in your communities who you think may have an interest in transportation. Our first meeting, which was in December, was on intergenerational policies and programs, and I know many of you here today were at that. You should have received an email that announcing that the video for that event and then all of the materials is on our website. Today's workshop is also being taped, so when we have all of that together, we'll send an email, and that can be for your use, and we encourage you to forward that to your colleagues in your city if that's an issue of interest to them. Today we bundled several topics in the workshop or in the checklist together. So we're going to be starting with a tutorial on social media, and then the briefings and brainstorming that will follow include topics on 3 of the areas in the checklist: communications within communities, social inclusion, and civic participation. So the briefings are going to be brief because it's 2 hours and a lot will be discussed. We've asked someone from a community who's doing some pretty substantial work in one of the topic areas to present what they're doing, followed by a brief period of brainstorming where you can share what your community's doing, or maybe through the discussion there'll be some new ideas that'll emerge that communities could consider. So we are going to try to keep this on schedule as much as possible, because there's really a lot to do. So I hope to, at this point, announce who's going to be presenting, and then we'll just flow from there. Amanda Keller, the Public Affairs Coordinator with Mid-America Regional Council, is going to give a presentation on social media, followed by Emily Randall, Public Information Officer from Mission, Kansas, who's going to talk about what Mission's doing. Carol Suter, City Council member with City of Gladstone, is going to talk about civic participation. And Erin Vader and Vanessa Von West from Olathe will be talking about examples of social inclusion. So we appreciate all of the presenters who agreed to be a part of today. And also Dean Catterndall, who I think everyone knows, Government Relations Forum Director here at MARC, is going to be helping the facilitation of the brainstorming sessions. So again, just want to welcome you, glad you're here. And if there's particular interest in one of these topics that we have to cut off because there's so much going today, there's a couple options that Dean will talk about as he gives closing remarks that we can continue the discussion. So with that, Amanda, I know you're here. Great.
Thank you, Kathy. And thank you for asking me to speak this morning. I am going to be talking to you about social media, and specifically using social media in government. So as Kathy said, I'm Amanda Keller. I'm a public affairs coordinator here at MARC, and one of my primary responsibilities in that role is managing our social media accounts. The agenda for my very brief presentation, as Kathy said, this morning. I am going to be trying to cover a lot in a very short amount of time, is an overview of social media use, why we should be using social media in local government, and then my kind of personal top 5 tips for how to up your social media game for your agency. I hope that you'll leave with some specific and actionable things that you can try to implement if you're not doing them already. I'm sure we have a wide variety of experience in the agencies represented here, so it was a little bit hard to, try and tailor this presentation so that everyone would get something out of it, but I certainly tried to do that. We probably won't have time for questions during this 20-minute session, but maybe during the brainstorming session, or I will be giving you a handout toward the end with my contact information, and I welcome you to give me a call or send me an email if you have any questions. So it probably doesn't surprise you to know that 87% of U.S. adults now use the internet at some level, and in large part, I think we can thank these things that we have constantly attached to our bodies anymore. And of those who are online, 73% use one or more social media sites. Could I see a raise of hands of who here uses Facebook, either personally or professionally? It'd just be nice to know. Okay, so most people have some level of familiarity with Facebook. What about Twitter? All right, great. Those are the two platforms, social media platforms, though there are certainly many, many more out there that are used most frequently by local governments in the Kansas City region. Here are the most recent statistics from the Pew Research Center. They do the best work on tracking social media usage and internet usage in the U.S. You can see in this bar graph from them that the darkest blue bar on the right side of each of those groups of bars represents the 2014 data for usage. So you can see that Facebook is still far and away the most widely used social media platform. 71% of people now use Facebook, specifically 71% of Americans who use the internet use Facebook. Those who use the internet, 28% use LinkedIn. Also 28% use Pinterest, which has certainly grown quite a lot in just the last couple of years. Instagram, 26%, and Twitter is still trailing at 23%, which to me seems a little surprising because I see that Twitter users are so engaged, and I do think that that will continue to grow despite maybe some of the rumors otherwise. So since Facebook is still far and away the most popular social media site today, I want to talk a little bit specifically about it. It has approximately 1.5 billion users worldwide, which is about the population of the country of China. It's interesting to look at the demographic breakdown, I think, of Facebook users and to see where the most growth is occurring. And I think of interest specifically to this group, and maybe not surprising to anyone, the fastest growing demographic group is folks age 65 and older in the United States. So that group, 65 plus, grew more than any other age group over the last 3 years, up 21% from 2012. And here, this table just shows 2013 and 2014 data. So you can see where I've highlighted both the 50 to 64 age range and then also the 65 plus. And if anyone in the back can't see, for these age 50 to 64, usage increased 3% between those 2 years, and then 65 plus, it went from 45 to 56%. So certainly, whereas you see some of the younger demographics are actually declining a little bit in usage. So it's interesting how those demographics are shifting. For the first time, more than half of all online adults 65 and older now use Facebook at 56%, according to Pew. So in other words, Facebook can be a good communication tool to reach residents of all ages, not just those in the younger generations. So social media and local government. These are what I would consider some of the top reasons why local governments should use social media. Meaningful engagement with residents and stakeholders where they are. We just established that they are on social media. To encourage participation and create two-directional communication with residents rather than just pushing information out and sort of not really knowing if anyone's seeing it. Increasing accessibility, transparency, and trust in local government, which can certainly be a challenge. Cost. Social media is definitely a low-cost communication tool compared to some of the other communication tools that are available to us in government. Notice I didn't say it's a no cost. I think it's important to recognize that it does take a lot of staff time, which of course we know can be a strain on our budgets. So those are kind of the top reasons I think social media in government is really important. But most of all, it's expected today. Here's a quote I like from a January 2013 report from Partnership for Public Service that I think sums it up rather nicely. An entire generation of voters and taxpayers now expects to communicate and conduct transactions through social media. Many citizens do not even remember life without such interaction. This is the new normal. So in other words, it's kind of a necessary thing, whether some of us like it or not. So next I'm going to share with you kind of my top 5 tips based on my experience for upping your social media game. Now granted, anyone with any amount of social media experience in government, I know Jill certainly, Jill Koch from the Sheriff's Office in Johnson County could give this presentation and give you a completely different set of to the top 5 things she would recommend. But it's very subjective. So today I'm going to focus on Facebook and Twitter, as I said, because those are the tools being used most by the local governments in our region. So my first tip is to increase your social media reach and engagement by adhering to social media best practices. Some of these are pretty basic, but things like including an image or video in all both Facebook posts and tweets. I think sometimes people still think of tweets as 140 characters of text, and it really, to get folks to engage, you really need to be including photos or images of some type in your tweets. Keep it, and that's what this infographic kind of illustrates. This is from HubSpot. Photos generate higher engagement, tweets engage, on both Facebook and Twitter. So it's an important thing. Keep it short and sweet. It's better not to max out the character limit if you can help it. You'll definitely see more retweets and more engagements if you're keeping things shorter. You'll see more engagements on both Facebook and Twitter because research shows that people do engage more with shorter content. It's easier for them to absorb and kind of understand the point of what you're saying. The hashtag, I think this is one of the reasons that people don't get on Twitter as much as I think they should. It's sort of confusing to people, but a hashtag is simply a pound sign that you remember from long ago in front of a keyword or a key phrase, and the pound sign is what makes it searchable. You just can't have any spaces in your phrase if there's more than one word. So this tip is don't abuse the hashtag. Research shows that you need to limit to 1 or 2 hashtags per post or per tweet. Really, hashtags aren't as popular on Facebook as they are on Twitter, but don't go crazy with them on Twitter. I think on Instagram, the research shows you can go crazy with them, but on Twitter, you really should limit it to 2 or less. If you want to start your own hashtag, for example, if you have a big event or a campaign and you want to start your own hashtag, first search on Twitter to make sure no one else is already using that hashtag. There have been some really embarrassing examples of when people didn't do that and their content started getting sort of mixed in with content that was completely unrelated to their topic. Also, run it by a few people to ensure that there's not something that you're missing. I think this might be a good example. The Cowboys in November 2014, they played the Jags in London. And I think it's a pretty bad fail when the Washington Post does a story about your hashtag fail. So their social media manager selected Cowboys UK because they were playing in London. Well, of course, in the Twitter sphere, this looked like Cowboys suck. So people had a lot of fun with that. And, you might say, well, shame on the Cowboys for being the ones to initiate that. And they should have maybe thought about that a little bit more. So if you want more examples, you could spend all day looking at these on Google. Tip number 2, learn about Facebook's mysterious news feed ranking algorithm. This used to be called EdgeRank. It's no longer called that, but it's just as mysterious. You need to adjust your content accordingly in order to increase your Facebook reach. It's very complicated, and I know I certainly am no expert. I don't understand all the ins and outs of it, but I've read articles by people who have learned a lot more than me about it and kind of tried to take out the nuggets of what they have learned. So the essence of this newsfeed ranking algorithm is that Facebook can't show you every post from every person that you follow on Facebook. It'd be just too much information. So they try to deliver you the information that they think, according to this algorithm, that you will find most useful as a user. So what this means for local governments is that everyone who likes your page is not seeing every one of your posts. For example, Mark's main Facebook page, which is what I have a screenshot of that here on the screen, we have just under 3,000 likes, and that's over there on the left if you're not familiar with the Facebook interface. We have almost 3,000 likes, and then highlighted down here in yellow, you can see I just pulled out a sort of random post that we've had recently. We average less than 300 people seeing one of our posts. So that's less than 10% of the people who actually follow our page, which can be really frustrating because you spend a lot of time and energy trying to build your following. So what can you do to kind of maximize the algorithm and make it work for you? Well, when I want to know the answer to a question like this, I look at what the experts are saying. And there's a man named Brian Solis who's written books about social media. He's one of the sort of thought leaders in this area. And these are his recommendations for how to get into the news feed, given what we know about the mysterious algorithm that could be changing right now as we speak, of course. So post regularly, especially on weekdays. Post images that are self-explanatory for ease of sharing. Encourage engagement through questions, contests, fill-in-the-blank statements. I know this is something that could be really fun for governments to be able to engage with their residents. I know it's something Mark doesn't do as well as we should, but we're working on it. Spend time deliberately monitoring and engaging with your partners' posts. That's one way that all of us in this room can help boost each other's interactions on Facebook. Avoid negative feedback when possible. I mean, that's kind of like a duh, but one bad post apparently, or when Facebook recognizes that someone's commenting and having negative emotions about something that you're posting, that really can harm your algorithm. And Facebook will start showing your content to people less. Focus on quality content. When creating content, make it relevant to your audience. So give it the what's in it for me rather than just, hey, Mark's doing this and you should care because it's great. Content really is king. So here's an example. I just told you that, excuse me, that any given post that we put on our Facebook page reaches 300 or fewer people unless it gets a lot of interaction. And this is the best example I have from recently of something we posted this story. It's a wonderful feel-good story about a sweet dog who rides the bus by himself to the dog park because this has been so ingrained in him that even if his owner isn't ready to go to the dog park, he'll just hop right on the bus and go down to his stop and get off. Anyway, it's a really cute story. So because it relates to transit, and so much of what Mark does and our program areas relate to transit, we threw it up on our Facebook page. And you can see that down here where I've highlighted in yellow, this got 3,684 views. That's more people than like our page. It had 83 likes, 3 comments, and 20 shares. So the bottom line really is that Facebook likes viral content. The algorithm sees that a post is getting a lot of interaction and engagement, and the system, their back-end system, automatically starts showing it to more people. So, that's something to keep in mind. Is I know we're really focused on, we need to let people know about this public meeting and, things that are really important, but it's good to be mixing in content like this that is interesting, maybe a little entertaining, and yet still relevant to the work that we're doing. Tip number 3 is put thought into when you schedule your content to post on both Facebook and Twitter. I forgot to leave it on here, but this is part of the same infographic that was on an earlier slide from HubSpot. HootSuite is a great tool for scheduling future social media posts. So if you see something post from your city at 10 o'clock at night, that doesn't mean that your social media manager was literally, sitting there posting it at that time. They probably scheduled it using something like this HootSuite platform that a lot of local governments use. You can sit down and schedule out a whole week of content at once. So it just makes us able to work a lot more efficiently. The general guidelines on frequency, which is something I know a lot of people want to know when they're first getting started, is, and of course this is different for everyone, but just to give you kind of a general starting point, Facebook, the guidelines are to post 5 to 10 times per week, approximately. And I'm going to give you an outline of this presentation, or Kathy's going to hand out an outline of this presentation toward the end. I just didn't want to give you all the stuff so you were reading it before I was saying it, but we'll hand that out in a minute. And then on Twitter, tweeting 5 times per day is actually what it kind of recommended, but I don't think that's necessarily true for local governments. I think that could be more for brands or news organizations. Just know that you are less likely to annoy your followers by posting more frequently on Twitter, whereas on Facebook you need to be a little bit more selective about what you're putting out there. Pay attention to the day of week and time of day posts and tweets are scheduled. There are general guidelines such as these that are on the screen. Facebook, Wednesday at around 3 p.m., according to some research that was done, is a good time. On Twitter, Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. is the hot spot, and then 3 p.m. So I'm sure as people are kind of starting their day, and then as they hit that lull in the afternoon, they decide to go check their social media. But it's best to look at your own fans and followers to determine the best time of day and the best day of the week to post. So something you can do, right now with your Facebook page is you log into your Facebook page, you go to Insights and then Posts, which I think is a weird place for this to live, but it does. And you'll see something like this. This is from Mark's Facebook page, Insights. And so you can see that along the top, it's showing us how many of our followers are online every day. On average, over the last week. And so we don't get much fluctuation. So that tells me as a social media manager, I don't need to worry too much about which time of day. I just need to be sort of spacing things out. Which day of the week. I just need to be spacing things out throughout the week. And then the bottom graph here shows that our largest number of fans are online in the evenings, probably after dinner, and maybe they put their kids to bed. So that's really good to know because more people are going to see our posts if we post during that time. This is a tool that I actually just recently learned about and have started using just in the last week, and I think it's great, and I want to tell people about it. So this little diagram came from something called Social Bro, like as in social brother, but it's just socialbro.com. And it's a free tool if you have less than 5,000 followers that you can use to analyze when your Twitter followers are online. And I'm sure it can do lots of things that I don't know about, but I had read about this best time to tweet report, so that's what I've been using it for so far. And that's what this diagram is from. It shows us kind of a scatter plot of when our users for our Recycle Spot Twitter account, because it has less than 5,000 followers, so I use that as my guinea pig. They are most online where these 2 black dots are. Wednesdays, in the 9 a.m. hour, and then Tuesdays in the noon hour. I wouldn't have guessed that. Before I saw this, I was scheduling a lot of tweets to deploy in the evenings because I was thinking they were probably more like our Facebook followers. So it's just really interesting, and that way you are being as strategic as possible by using something like this social probe. This is just a screenshot of HootSuite. If you're interested in asking any questions about HootSuite, I'm happy to answer them. I just wanted to kind of show you that you can be monitoring all of your Twitter accounts and all of your Facebook accounts all in one interface, which can be really helpful. There on the left, it shows any time someone mentions one of our, this particular Twitter account, which is at Mark KC Trans. It's our transportation-specific Twitter account. The next one over is a geocoded search term that searches for anyone tweeting with the word transportation in it in this region. And the cool thing about this in HootSuite is you can do that kind of in Twitter itself, but you can set a specific radius for how far you want that search to go from your specified location. So anyway, that's another thing we could spend lots of time talking about. Let me know if you have any questions on that specifically. But I'm probably out of time. So this is my last tip, and that is to use promoted, which is paid, posts and tweets on social media when you really need to reach more people. So this is an example of a promoted post that we did on Facebook. For $50, we reached 5,645 people instead of that 300 or so. We got 142 likes, 9 comments, and 19 shares. So this is important for us. It has to do with our 50 Faces of Head Start program. So we wanted to go beyond just the organic reach that we would get without paying to promote any posts. So that's all I got. And I don't think we have time because I think I went over. But I'll stick around for the brainstorming.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Randall, City of Mission's Public Information Officer, and I hope what I have to say bounces off that topic just to provide an example of a city. We certainly have no secrets. We're experimenting. I think we provide a good example for a smaller city who's experimenting and trying to just see what works in a pretty grassroots way. I came to Mission in May of 2013, and at that time, we had social media accounts, but I don't think that they were very well trafficked. We had a presence, but it wasn't a very authentic one. We didn't have a public information officer position at that time. I think we were, wading into it, and I'm sure that's the case for a lot of cities, especially of that size at that time, but of course fewer and fewer with every year we move into the future. So when we undertook a really large construction project in our downtown, the Johnson Drive redevelopment, we knew that information was going to be critical and that we were going to need a pretty proactive approach regarding that project specifically. And in response to that, we created a public information officer position. And in conjunction with that, we had been doing more work in a lot of our different programs, including neighborhood services. And we're really trying to increase our reach. So we have just shy of 10,000 people. It's a really tight-knit community. We have some really nice neighborhood associations that kind of provide some structure for us. So we kind of knew our points of entry, but really needed to kind of up our game in response to this big project. So in that time, we've been able to truly engage with our social media presence in a lot of the ways that Amanda alluded to. And I just have a couple of just thoughts in response to that. But really, I think the fundamental piece of how social media needs to be genuine in order for it to really work. So I do believe in the timing, and the pacing is similar to what we're using and what we see. But I'm seeing it be a way to almost show support of our partners. I'm thinking we're using it in 3 fundamental ways. well, one of them is to just promote ourselves, but another is to focus on those major projects. And then the third is the support of those in our community. And that only works when you're really truly doing it. So one example, just in terms of what she shared about how fundamental it is becoming. I don't know if some of you come from communities that are small enough that your business license, occupational license applications are still in paper format. That's where we are. And having the email address even requested on the form is not something that we have achieved yet, but we are getting there. But I sit right by the window where those customers come and fill out their occupational license and their business license, and I've learned the importance of pouncing on that person before they leave the building to ask them for their contact information in terms of email, but also in social media. And it's so key that the city be at the beginning when a new business enters their community to be able to back support their launch. We need to, know that they're there, be supportive of them, help them connect with their neighboring businesses, and then of course residents and future customers. And so, we'll be going back and reiterating the importance of updating that form and saying, while you give us your business mailing address, of course, so we can get in touch with you, please, tell us how we can be in touch with you online and on Facebook and Twitter so that we can support that. So I think it's just a small and, kind of arcane example of how we want to move the social media into like a real legitimate place in terms of how we connect with those who are in our community. So that's one piece. And then I think, too, just fostering connections between people. Every time the City of Mission likes some, positive story about one of our businesses, we have a platform that's larger than that business, potentially, oftentimes, and that just helps in an economic development method. That's just another piece of how we can be supportive and at the table and engaged with our business community and also our nonprofits, for sure. So then the second piece is just that big project avenue, so that when when you've got a project that's large enough that you know that you're going to have a higher number of eyes and a heightened level of attention, even if that comes from a pretty negative, stressful place in terms of construction, it provides a chance to just bring your game up again. So we just saw, because the appetite for the information was so present, a real chance to experiment. It was a prolonged opportunity. It went over several months. We were able to try different things throughout the course of the construction. So how I inherited our outreach list, was just an email. It wasn't fancy, but by the end, we were planning for our ribbon cutting event, which we call a barricade breaking event. By that time, we were fully experimenting. We were playing around with fun videos on our Facebook page. We were just taking advantage of a lot of connections on social media that were already in place that had been sharing information. I post something about a road closure. It gets shared in a way that none of our other content had been being shared in the past, because it's mission critical, no pun intended, but it's everyone cares about it so much that they're willing to participate and jump in and then follow. And so by the end of it, I think we were really achieving a pretty high level of engagement and sophistication that we hadn't in the past, and really taking the time. It was that opportunity to really give full court press to something that mattered a lot to us. So right now, we're in 2015, trying to transition some of those lessons into our comprehensive plan review and our Parks Master Plan review. So two really critical processes that will require as many people at the table as we can get. And so we'll be trying to keep that fresh focus with taking advantage of the connections and hoping that every time someone comes to one of those public meetings or engages with us in one of those methods, that it grows upon itself, that we'll be even more ready next time with more connections made and more eyes already on our platforms. And the third piece I think that we're wrestling with that I just want to toss out, especially for the brainstorming session, is just the number of tools that there are and the constant cost-benefit analysis that we're all doing in terms of where we put our energies. We, certainly Facebook and Twitter seem to be no-brainers. And in the time since that I mentioned in 2013, we have a new website. We've launched a Mind Mixer site. We get pressure to participate on My Sidewalk. I'm glad that's a joke for everyone. That's kind of fun. I don't know if some of you who don't know, it's a very, very, very aggressive sales pitch that a lot of us are getting right now. But then also one of our homeowners associations is using Nextdoor to great benefit, and they came to us and requested our presence there, and that was refreshing. That it was a public entity coming to us asking for that participation instead of the other way around, because I am suspecting that the more times I ask people to create new logins, at some point I'm going to lose them. I don't know if I've lost them yet, but I'm having a hard time stepping up to the plate and saying, hey guys, I have a brand new platform for you all to play around with and provide basically the same level, same types of content. So the neighborhood association, if you picture the rectangular area, next door, I don't know if you're familiar, but it can track based on household, and, the president of this homeowners association was coming to us and saying, we've got an X percentage, and it's high, I can't remember, but 80% or so of households are using it, and they're finding a lot of success with it, and so it's kind of that, where are you, city? And that, are bad to not be at the front end of that, but on the other hand, really refreshing to know that it was already established and that we could jump in on something that they were finding really effective. So we're using that just in terms of key meetings. I'm not on there all the time, but just really critical, like when we have our kickoff for our comprehensive plan review, that was an open house and it was kind of all hands on deck, and so we post there, and we're trying to be selective with their content, but have a presence all the same. And so our Mind Mixer site is only just about a month old, and we're kind of dipping our toe in there, and I know some of you in the room have even more experience with it, but it's a struggle. It's a struggle to try to pull someone away from a content that they'll be on anyway. They're there on Facebook because they care about their friends and grandkids and whoever, but so we want to just show up on a stream that they're already looking at. But Mind Mixer feels a lot to me like we're asking them to stop what they're doing and do something else. So we'll see. But on the other hand, I find it's attractive and potentially promising, and maybe refreshing for some users to just kind of dip a little deeper into a particular topic. So, it's kind of, I just wanted to sort of throw out our examples as a way to start the discussion, to say it's an ever-changing landscape for sure, as we all know, but I've enjoyed the chance to use it in support of our residents and our businesses, and I think they're there too, liking what we're doing, and it is flexible, it's nimble. You can, up your level of participation or dial it back depending on the results that you're seeing, and so kind of every project's a new chance to try something different. So, that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Emily. So we want to give you a little chance to input your experiences, but before we do that, I did want to give you an opportunity to, do you have any questions of either Emily or Amanda, some of the stuff they presented? Or maybe something that reinforces something they said. Yeah.
I have a question, because we've been approached by My Sidewalk and Mind Mixer as well, and one of the, and I'm going to ask you to help me differentiate. One of them was saying the key thing that they liked was that our city officials could get together and have meetings and not have to be in a room somewhere. So, that was a way for, and we all know that Kansas has laws that prevent us from doing that. So I was wondering how you would avoid that on things like Mind Mixer, where you're asking for engagement, and is it just a policy you have to come across with your elected officials that, hey, and your appointed committees, hey, you can't do business on these sites? So how do you balance that, or are you just starting to explore that?
Yeah, we are still at an early point, so that we haven't had that. I'm actually asking them to come and participate at this point. So we're not to that point, and I think everyone's nervous about that, both in terms of department heads weighing in, just because I work at the city doesn't mean that my comment is, final answer or the direction that we're necessarily going to go in, but we do need to find a way to show that back and forth. Because what's the point of putting your idea out there if you don't think any of the decision makers are going to hear it or take it seriously? And so we're going to be trying to show that participation both on our elected officials, department heads and board and commission members. But so far we're trying to raise the level of in participation instead of having to dial it back. But it's a great point, and I think what we'll be telling people is provide supportive comments, provide information when it's lacking, in key ways, but stop short of all of that dangerous territory. So we'll be crossing that bridge, I think, but we're not quite there.
So Amanda, does Mark have a policy on, we have a pretty large staff of participating in those discussions? Do we just let everybody run wild, or
Yeah.
did they have to go through you? I didn't know.
No, right now we don't have a policy in place for our staff participating on various social media platforms. I think it's something we need to have, and I've recognized that for a while. It's just, making the time for.
And as it gets more and more ingrained in what we do, it'll become a bigger, it's just like in the old days when someone said something in the paper and all of a sudden you see your department head committing you to something. I did also have a question on time commitment. How much, I know our experience with Mind Mixer at Mark was, oh, it's great, but wow, it took a lot more time to use it, staff time, than we had thought originally. Well, than the rest of us thought. Our public affairs people knew it was going to take a lot of time. They kept telling us, but we didn't pay any attention, so.
I don't know your experience, you guys are just getting started with
starting.
Mind Mixer, but I think, and I came on after we already had Mind Mixer, and so I don't know, Laura or someone else from Mark's public affairs staff could probably answer this question better than I could, but I know after I came on board, that was one of my roles, is to monitor comments and things. The monitoring and responding piece was not that different than what we would do on any other social media site, and it wasn't that cumbersome, I didn't think, but we also didn't have that level of participation we probably would have wanted. The most time-consuming thing for us, and the way that we had sort of modeled it, was getting the content, coordinating with, we have so many different programs here, to coordinate with program staff, figure out exactly what we need to know from the public, how to phrase the question, what the question needs to look like. It just, that side of it, preparing the content to go on the site, is really what, for us, took a lot of resources that we just couldn't really devote to it.
Sort of something.
Question for Amanda. When you're trying to get people involved in things, when you're using your Facebook page, does it help to use the events feature as opposed to just posting an individual post about it? I've done some of that with civic groups that I work with and campaign events, that kind of thing. And if you post an event, it seems like, but I don't know if that's the same for cities or other businesses or anybody else that's using it.
Well, and other, people might want to chime in as well that do this social media management for their agencies. But for Mark, I thought it was interesting, just a few weeks ago, I posted something about a public meeting we had on a transportation topic, and someone actually commented, well, are you going to post an event? Are you going to actually make this an event? And we kind of had that conversation, well, gosh, we usually don't do that, but why don't we do that? And, like you said, there's always these learning moments. So in addition to the post we had already posted with the image and the basics and a link for more information, we went ahead and also created a Facebook event, which doesn't take any more time, as you know, than creating a post. So we went ahead and tried it to see if it seemed like people were engaging with it, and they were. And we got I don't know, 17 or 18 people to say yes, that they were going to attend the event. And then your partners can share it too. And we had a few people, KCATA and a few other partners share it. So that was actually our one example of that. And so that has told me that we need to be doing that more in the future. So I would say yes, that's a good
Does
best
that get
practice.
into the news feed then, the event?
It will it's just, still uses the algorithm. It's not like events will go ahead and be pushed out to everyone versus a post that only goes to that 10%. Because I was watching that and I was curious to see, and it was still only serving to that small number of people.
So when you create this event, are you inviting like everyone that likes your page?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think with a page versus a personal page, I think a business page you can't select people to
I guess I've
invite.
never made a business event.
Well, I hadn't either, so it was a learning experience.
Other questions? Otherwise, we'd also like to give you an opportunity to share your experiences. Have you had a successful social media experience or use of social media? Or maybe a not so successful experience, a cautionary tale out there? Yes,
I'll share just one cautionary with regard to Nextdoor.
and just speak up, this is a tough road.
As I was saying, we had the experience of some neighborhoods within Nextdoor taking on a very negative tone and then turning that against the city, and you know how rumors spread like wildfire, especially on social media. So events would happen in a neighborhood, they would tag that as being something of concern or something the city did or didn't, and we found ourselves involved in spending way too much time in trying to correct misinformation. And so it's just, as you get involved with those sites, you've got to be thinking ahead of how you're going to get the correct message out, and when you are going to choose to respond and when not to, and then set your policy from there. Because we had a few key people that just would continue to put out false information, and we could spend all our time battling that, or decide on a direction of when we're going to respond to that and when we're just simply going to say, folks, you need to realize the source, and then move on. So that was a negative experience we had, but I think after a while it took us time, but we got our arms around that. So.
And was that the Nextdoor, were you sponsoring the community, or was
No,
that
actually,
the neighborhood that set it
Well,
up?
we actually encouraged neighborhoods to use them. We found out in one neighborhood we had some folks who just don't like to play nice and wanted to always find the worst thing about their neighborhood and their city. They thought that was the way to get out the message to get the city to do something. It wasn't in most cases what the majority of the community wanted. But so they found that as their platform, so to speak, their way to get out in front of the camera without being in a camera setting. And it caused an awful lot of angst on the city's part. It involved our police department in some cases, as well as multiple other departments, from community development to public works to health, you name it. They had something negative to say that drew staff time away. So we just had to decide where we were going to put a foot down and say we're not responding to these kinds of things, and then start to beef up our own positive and proactive message out there to redirect those folks away from these few key individuals to our site and to our information. So one of the ways we did that was hire a PIO. If you don't have one, hire a guy.
If you don't have one, get one.
Yeah, if you don't have one, you need one yesterday.
Yeah.
I think it's important, I have a question, your experience with the negative Nextdoor, was that using the governmental interface, or was it having staff people who were members in their own neighborhood?
No, these were citizens. It happened to be probably the most active neighborhood in the core of Independence in our historic district neighborhood. So those are folks who have lots of interactions with our city staff by nature of where they live and the different departments in city government that relate to them. So,
But it wasn't the governmental interface, and I think it's important to talk about that. The governmental interface that was being requested in Mission and Overland Park's working on at this point is sort of like a two-way mirror, or a two-way glass, it's one way. So the city can post things out, but the neighborhood you can't see what the neighborhood is talking about. Now, we'll confess in public, we've done it to the company, that some staff members have been registered as people in a neighborhood on Nextdoor. There you can see all of the posts, but one of the pitfalls is if you are posting as a citizen on there, you don't have the high road of saying you have your privacy and we are only pushing out information that's official. The official city posts, you can, if, say, as a police department or whatever, you're posting things out, you can respond to replies the neighborhood is given. And in general, those replies are higher quality. And I'm also a member in my own neighborhood in Kansas City. And there's quite a bit of self-policing that goes on if people aren't expecting the city to do that policing. So I think the city's policy of not having the city, Nextdoor's policy of not having the city be the police person on that website is important. Does that make sense?
So you really need the neighborhood to take ownership.
The neighborhood needs to take on that self-correcting role rather than city, and that's the reason why they have that city interface, is that there's privacy among citizens. If they want to run amok, they can, but you don't need to be wearing that mud, and I fully appreciate that.
Some of those things, I think, came about in result with conversations some of our staff had with Nextdoor and with the administrator of some of these neighborhoods months and months ago, because they recognized there were these problems around. And the self-policing is only as good as whomever your administrator of that Nextdoor neighborhood is.
Right.
We had one who was a firm believer in freedom of speech and didn't want to shut down comments, and yet it became very cumbersome because he knew that a lot of information was not truthful. So, yeah, it's a growing and working process, but I think the earlier on that you say, here's our position, here's how we're going to disseminate our factual information, and then you have to just let folks understand that if they hear something else, they're going to have to judge whether that's truthful or not.
Other experiences, positive experiences?
I was working with a community of about 50 houses, and I'm going to stand up because I can't see everyone.
Yeah, that'd be great.
About 50 houses with a goal of having about 80 houses, residents in their community, to use Nextdoor. I encouraged them to use it, but the administrator person actually, it came out in talks where he wanted us to be their personal source of information from law enforcement. So if they see Kansas City or Gladstone going through their neighborhood, they wanted me to go on there and say, yeah, hey guys, this is what's going on. So once I found that out, I said, look, I think it's great for you to share information with each other and then come together as a community and then reach out to me personally. Or I encourage them to use Twitter and Facebook for information. And then I just kind of assured them that if something was happening in their community, we would try to get that information out to them as quickly as possible. As if somebody who's on foot, running, who just committed a violent crime or something like that, give a description. But if I can't because I'm out there dealing with the situation, just stand by. But if you see cars, with lights and sirens and people outside your house, lock your doors, stay safe, don't come outside, don't try to engage us, and then we'll let you know what's going on. Unfortunately, that community, once I told them that we're not going to be personally involved in providing you specific source of information, they kind of just dropped it. So I would just caution you to look out for ulterior motives too, whether it be law enforcement or a city, because now, oh, you're a part of our group, now we expect you to listen to us specifically, and then I think that's where
Yeah, that's kind of
you
what
kind of
happens.
went on to it. But that's my experience with Nextdoor.
Other experiences? Sounds like you need to direct folks to go to whatever official social media the city's sponsoring. So if you have a tweet, go look there, sign up